Part of why I enjoy this job so much is the diversity of how I can work with the community. I guess the short answer is going to be I work with people who care about trees and want to make their communities an inviting and a healthy place to live and to work in.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Kansas Forest Service podcast. I'm your host, Cassie Wondersea, and today I have Kim Bomberger with me on the podcast. How are you doing today, Kim?
Well, I'm doing okay, Cassie. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for joining me. So those of you that haven't had a chance to meet Kim or hear her on one of our previous podcasts, she is the District Community Forester for Northeast and North Central Kansas. So Kim, in your role as a community forester, can you tell me just a little bit about what you do and how you help communities?
A few specifics. Anything from attending and supporting Arbor Day observances to supporting the formation and the operations of tree boards. I get quite a few requests from cities who want to plant new trees, especially in their parks. So part of that might be consulting with the community, finding out what vision they have for that property. Yeah, maybe even drawing a planting proposal. And yeah, a lot of times it's also going back and helping plant the trees. So actually planting trees with local folks. It could be community volunteers or the tree board members, whatever that might be. Probably one of the more labor intensive, time intensive services that community foresters provide is helping collect data for our forestry program so they know uh, what their tree resource is. So it can be something like a windshield survey where we drive through the town. A lot of times I do that by myself. I take lots of pictures. I make notes about the trends of what I see. And then I'll write like a 4-page report back to the community telling them what I saw and observed, and then what their next steps could be if they wanted to begin the steps of forming a forestry program or establishing a tree board. And then once a program has formed and we have local folks in place overseeing the public tree resource, then a lot of times we'll go in and do these detailed inventories where we're calling species, size, and condition of each tree. And then from that, the data is analyzed, and then corresponding management recommendations are written from those findings. So that's a pretty time intensive thing, but it might be about the most important thing that we do, because how do you know what there is to manage until you have the data to tell you that? Sometimes, a few times over the years, I've had a person or two look at me and says, "Well, I suppose you're a tree hugger." and, and I've said, "Well, yeah, but I do make removal recommendations." And so that is part of it. It's when someone's concerned about a park tree, a street tree, wherever the tree is on public lands. Definitely I can go in and go through that process with the local folks and help them understand the options. And a lot of times I write reports from that as well. We conduct workshops. Before COVID, they were in person. Now we're doing a few things virtually now because of the circumstances. So training either on site through workshops. And I do partner quite a bit with tree boards and city staff and local extension agents when there's a need for some public education. So quite a bit there, but it's a fun job because of the many different kind of things that we can do.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And from my understanding, one of the main things that you really do is help a community strategize for its tree resources and the management of it, especially in, Northeast Kansas, where we do have emerald ash borer. That's impacting so many of our communities, but looking there at tree removals, but then also tree plantings and how to prevent such a devastating wipeout of trees in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a big concern. So the emerald ash borer, of course, is a threat that's been in the state since 2012. It's now been found in 35 states and 5 Canadian provinces. So, unfortunately, it's going to be a problem that a lot of us are going to have to deal with for a long time. But we have storms, we have drought, we have now moisture excesses, and that can be flooding. Um, there's always just something kind of that's affecting trees. So you're right, strategy is a big part, and long term and short term planning is a big part of the job.
Hmm. Well, and so maybe transitioning a little bit here, segueing as part of that strategy, communities can really start thinking about some public engagement events that might help raise awareness. And Arbor Day is coming up the last Friday in April. So can you just tell me a little bit about Arbor Day and what that looks like in Kansas?
Yeah, so in in the forestry world, that is definitely our holiday. Oftentimes, people refer to it as the tree planters holiday, but really, it's more than that. It's a holiday when we hope that people will take the time to observe the importance of trees to themselves, but also to the environment around us, to the community, and to the world. So the how Arbor Day came to be actually started in Nebraska. So when J. Sterling Morton and his wife moved to Nebraska from the East Coast, they of course were moving to a treeless plain, much like Kansas was back in those days of settlement. And he was in a position of being a newspaper editor, and he had the ability to advocate and to talk about the need for trees, and had the reach to do that through that avenue. So through his efforts, and I'm sure a whole lot of other people's efforts, in 1872 um, was what most consider the first Arbor Day, and it was a call to plant trees in the Nebraska Territory. And on that day, it's estimated that about 1 million trees, if not more, were planted.
Oh,
Two
wow.
years later, yeah, a lot, right?
Yeah.
And in 1874, uh, the documents say that more than 12 million trees were planted in the territory. So this idea, this notion of um, setting a time aside to talk about the importance of trees, it began there, and it just continued to grow. So in 1885, it was named a legal state holiday in Nebraska. And from there on, all 50 states and 33 countries now observe the holiday. The holiday, it's observed differently. And of course, it may depend on the climate of when Hawaii observes Arbor Day versus when we do here in Kansas. And like you
Mhm.
said, the Kansas Arbor Day is the last Friday of April, as is the National Arbor Day. I even dug into it a little bit, Cassie, thinking,
Mhm.
we never talk about how Arbor Day got started in Kansas. And I
Oh,
found,
yeah.
yeah, yes. And I found just one article. It's from a publication of a long name, basically a cyclopedia of state history. It discusses events and things like that. It's a standard publication company, and Frank Blackmar is the editor on this. But what they described in there was that in Kansas, it was recognized in 1875 by Thomas Anderson, J. Anderson, and at the time he was mayor of Topeka. And his proclamation called for the planting of trees on the Capitol grounds. And on that day, 800 trees were planted. He issued another Arbor Day proclamation the following year. And because of this, other towns and cities caught on to this and began planting trees in public thereafter. It was in 1883 that Governor George Glick then issued a proclamation setting then April 25th to be observed. as
Mm.
an Arbor Day, and it's believed to have been the first like official recognition given by the state.
Hmm.
Um, I was interested to see that it was in 1970 that President Richard Nixon proclaimed National Arbor Day. So, multiple ways. It all started in Nebraska, but that snowball continued to roll into our state and throughout the nation.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if any of those original Arbor Day trees are still alive on the Capitol grounds there in Topeka.
Yeah, I have wondered that too while I've been there. And I
Yeah.
might point out that while we have the state official Arbor Day,
Hmm.
several of my communities, and I work with 50 something forestry programs, and some of them will celebrate and observe Arbor Day maybe in the coming week, or sometimes it's because of when circumstances line up with their schools. Sometimes they may observe in May. So just letting the audience know that, yeah, we have our official Arbor Day, but keep an eye out in your own community. It may be observed at another time.
Yeah, and nobody says you need a holiday once a year to plant a tree. So,
Oh no, well,
just
no, let's just do it all the time, right?
right. So, I mean, Kim, why is it so important for those tree plantings to happen, whether it's Arbor Day or any other time of the year that's, weather conducive and conditions are right for tree planting?
Well, I think let's just start with the fact that trees are living organisms, and they definitely have, they germinate, but then they also, depends on the tree, it depends on the circumstances. It could be hundreds of years later that then they may die. And so, you think about the fact that we have shorter lived trees, longer lived trees. Well, if we just planted our trees just all in one year and we never did anything again, we wouldn't have this continually growing canopy cover in our landscapes, in our communities, in our farmyards, wherever it might be. We're taught in school that trees provide oxygen, and then they provide shade, and they provide protection from winter winds and summer winds. But without going like really deep into a 30-minute discussion about this, they provide other really extensive and really essential social and economic, environmental, and health benefits. In in national circles, especially in the last few years, has been a lot of discussion about what trees do for us as people. And that's been a topic that's really been of interest of mine, because I've been involved in a couple of regional assessments where we learned from that how trees help reduce our asthma exacerbations. They may help reduce lost school and lost work days, prevent heart attacks, reduce respiratory distress. I personally have allergies, so I definitely know when the winds are blowing and particulate matters in the air. I definitely feel that. So imagine what tree canopies do in this case for air pollutants, for particulate matter to intercept and absorb these pollutants. But let's also talk about water quality.
Hmm.
You and I live in farm country, and we know the benefits of keeping soil in place and why that's important. And we've got, of course, rural foresters and watershed foresters that are working with landowners throughout the state on why trees are important. So with these stressors, we don't know what the next insect or disease is going to be, or the climatic event. Uh, just the practice of planting trees and making sure that we have this ongoing living organism working on our behalf is just really incredibly important, not just for our lifetime, but for the generations to come.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that's one thing that you and I have talked about too before is how, our urban canopies and urban forests, they're all starting to age quite a bit. And a lot of the trees are within that same age. So as they're starting to decline, it's a mass decline. It's not a tree here or a tree there, it's an entire street of trees. So just the importance there of, like you said, continually planting trees. So you've got some variation there in the age of the canopy.
Absolutely. And it's pretty eye-opening, maybe just a little bit shocking. And I shouldn't be shocked probably now, but when you roll into a community and I'm doing an inventory and you see, for instance, how many ash are along these streets.
Hmm.
So, these neighborhoods, these streetscapes, your real options when emerald ash borer rolls into your community or into your homestead if you're in rural America. But when it rolls in, your choices are going to be to treat the best condition ash trees that are worthy of treatment or to remove them, because once the tree dies, then its condition deteriorates very rapidly. So, you're right, to be planting. And I really want to talk about the need of diversity in our plantings. Dutch elm disease, chestnut blight, pine wilt, and now the emerald ash borer. These are just continuing examples. There's a problem called the Asian longhorn beetle that I believe is found in 4 states in the eastern part of our country, not yet detected in Kansas.
Hmm.
But this is an insect that has a long list of preferred and then lesser preferred host. Well,
Hmm.
maples at the top of the list for being preferred, and a few other trees. So diversifying our landscape is just ever so important. So keeping that in mind as we look at our yards, what
Hmm.
we're planting there, and paying attention to maybe what your communities are planting too in their parks as well, can
Hmm.
help us safeguard our forested resource.
Yeah, because it's really not a matter of if the next insect or disease or blight will happen. It's just a matter of when. So yeah, I think there's a
Yes.
lot that communities can do by really thinking about planting that diverse uh, selection of tree species and thinking about what decisions they're making, not going in and planting an entire street back to ash or planting it all in maple trees, but really having a good diversity there, especially.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. There were 2 quotes that I saw kind of preparing for today, Cassie.
Hmm.
J. Sterling Morton, who I mentioned earlier, he's largely credited as the father of Arbor Day. His quote: "The cultivation of trees is the cultivation of the good, the beautiful, and the ennobling in man." Um, of course, until I began doing this job, I may not have caught on to that, but I think that's, kind of an overreaching, a kind of this philosophy that I think really can resound with so many of us. And there's a Chinese proverb that also says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the
Hmm.
second best time is now.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when you think about the importance of what folks can do where they live, what we do as community or rural or watershed foresters, all of us that are working in the state, uh, those are 2 quotes that I especially like.
Hmm. Hmm. So, Kim, thinking back on Arbor Days throughout the year, do you remember the first time you participated in an Arbor Day planting, or what the very first Arbor Day celebration would have been?
Yeah, actually, I do. I do. The city of Valley Falls, I hadn't been on the job, oh, I don't even know, a month. Let's just say a month, thereabouts. And they had invited me to come up. And what they like to do is the city staff works with the 6th grade teacher, I believe it is, both 6th grade teachers in that school. Well, because I was brand new on the job, the newspaper article or editor, excuse me, Clark, had reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you got there earlier, I'd like to visit with you and let folks in this part of the world know that you're the new community forester. So I hustled up to Valley Falls that day, chatted with Clark a little bit, and what Valley Falls does for their Arbor Day observance is we go into the classroom, me and the city person. It could be the clerk or the manager, and we go in and we do just a short kind of educational exercise with the kids, and then we walk down to City Park and plant the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And Clark does a nice job of making Arbor Day very front page and doing a lot about that. So that was my first Arbor Day.
Yeah, well, that's
And
awesome.
it was a very enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my first Arbor Day that I remember was probably kindergarten here in Dwight with Jean Johnson, Mrs. Johnson. I imagine we planted some sort of a tree, but that's it's been a few years ago now. But my
Well,
first
if you want to go that far back, if you want to go that far back, I do remember in 8th grade hopping on the school bus with my 8th grade teacher, Doc Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
And my class, I don't know, we had 10 or 12 kids in it, but I do remember going out and digging up red buds and whatever native trees we could find and bringing them back to the school to plant. So if you want to go that far back, I do remember that.
Yeah, gosh, it's definitely changed a little bit, hasn't it? Where we used to, it's living out here in our rural areas, you used to being able to just go out to the pasture and dig a tree up and transplant it, and not quite the same way we do it these days, but yeah. So
yeah.
thinking of Arbor Day, it seems like, our ties, and especially our first memories, are really tied to schools. And, having that classroom participation or that educational moment where somebody comes in and talks about trees or doing a tree planting. But I know you are responsible for a very large classroom project across the entire state of Kansas with the Arbor Day poster contest. So how did that poster contest come to be, and what can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay, well, sure. So I think it was the A poster contest was already occurring in Kansas. At the time that I began with the Forest Service, the Arbor Day Foundation was creating a lesson plan and distributing it nationwide. And so they held the national contest. Well, then state forestry agencies, we would support those efforts in our state as we needed to and as possible. Well, then the time came that the foundation, I think what really drove it is they lost critical funding for the program. So when that happened, we were engaging at that time, and I became the coordinator, I don't know, 2005, 2006. Time gets away from me, right? So
yeah.
So when that happened, we looked at the fact that we were engaging more than 1,000 students. Some years we were engaging somewhere upwards to 1,800 students throughout the state, but definitely, the numbers were very strong. And so, after talking to community forestry staff, we said, yeah, this will be something that we continue. And so we have, and what's great about this opportunity is, of course, is to get educational information, of course, about trees into schools.
Mm-hmm.
So the poster contest is an artistic competition that is open to public, private, and homeschooled 5th grade classrooms across the state. And what it strives to do is increase an appreciation and awareness of the important role that trees play in our quality of life, in our communities, our ecosystems, in our state as a whole. Currently, as you well know, since you helped me with this, is our themes change every 3 years. And the content, of course, changes with the theme. And currently, we're running with "We All Need Kansas Trees for Resilient Ecosystems." And that really plays into a lot of what we've talked about, right?
Mhm.
Already about um, teaching students, not, we teach them how to identify differences between trees, but why biodiversity is so important for wildlife and people. And the lesson plan goes through how to properly select and plant trees. So it's built for classroom, being administered by a teacher. And even in the days of COVID, parents could have taken this lesson plan and done it with their kids. Um,
Mhm.
it does support several Kansas college and career ready standards for science with multiple cross cutting concepts. So if a teacher chooses to use the lesson plan in their classrooms, we're also helping them meet some of these standards. And it's for science, if I didn't say that,
Mm.
as well as these cross cutting concepts.
Okay.
We're very lucky in Kansas to have a strong partnership. When I took the coordination role of the contest over, um, we had a few partners in those early years, and currently, Evergy, ITC, the Kansas Arborist Association, Kansas Nursery and Landscape Association, and the Kansas Association for Conservation and Environmental Education are all long-term partners that allow us to do some pretty great things to recognize the talents of our 6 district and state winners of the contest
Mhm.
and show appreciation to their teachers and schools, as well as the teachers and the other local partners who support the contest in their communities. So, it's a bit of work, but I tell you what, it's a lot of fun to see these imaginative posters that
Mhm.
the kiddos draw. And I'm definitely glad that we have these opportunities to talk about the importance of trees in our
Mhm.
state.
Yeah, I mean, because, just here where you and I were able to reflect back on our memories of Arbor Day, those are things that are, I think, going to stick with kids too, when they were in 5th grade and did a poster contest and got to plant a tree as a classroom or as a school. I think those things really, really stick with you over time.
Well, and they
So,
do.
hmm
They do. You remember with Mrs. Johnson, and I remember with Mr. Caesar,
hmm hmm
going back to those experiences with trees, right?
Yeah, yeah. So for those of us that unfortunately aren't in 5th grade and can't participate in the poster contest anymore, what are some ways that we individually can participate in or celebrate Arbor Day?
Well, if you're in a community that is holding a public Arbor Day event, COVID has changed things, right? It's made it more difficult. People have been, of course, cautious about gatherings. But I can tell you that several communities have told me that they're holding some kind of an event. Some of them may not be directly open to the public, but where they are and where you see these opportunities, if not to just attend, but maybe to participate, those might be opportunities for you to learn about trees, meet other people that are excited about trees, like maybe you are as well. So look for those local celebrations or those volunteer opportunities. You and I have worked in the Kansas City area quite a bit, right?
Mhm.
And um, Heartland Tree Alliance, who we've worked with quite a bit, they provide a lot of tree planting opportunities there. So it may not officially be Arbor Day if
Mhm.
you're helping with a tree planting event that day, but you can have the Arbor Day um, uh, experience, right? Of helping reestablish trees in their communities. Even plant and establish trees in your own landscape or in your neighborhood. Engage with any of these groups that might be doing something right there where you live. Um, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of communities do observe Arbor Day in April. I've got a community that prefers to do their Arbor Day observance in fall. So I think it's usually in October. And so just be on the lookout for when those events might happen. You can have an Arbor Day spirit all
Mhm.
throughout the year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Just trying to find those ways to get involved in a local community or planting a tree in your own landscape and share those experiences on social media with your neighbors and just spread the word about Arbor Day and getting out to plant trees and enjoy trees. So,
That's right.
but awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much for being on the podcast and talking about Arbor Day with us and how you help communities think about those community tree resources. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Cassie. It's nice to visit with you, and there's more than 90 Tree City USA's in Kansas, and they're all doing wonderful things in their own communities to make a difference for where they live and you live, and maybe where you work, where your children go to school. And so, there's a lot of wonderful people making a difference throughout our state, and they're carrying on the Arbor Day spirit.